Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So we're from group 18 and we're going to talk about language and globalization as an obligation of discourse analysis subject. With me, Belva, Amalia, Destaty, my student number 832019285, and with my partner, Agustine, Sekar, Kinaryosih, with student number 832019288. Happy watching! As you can see on the screen, all of those parts are going to be discussed during the presentation. The first part, views on discourse as a facet of globalization, and then the next part, discourses of globalizations, and then it will be continued with rescaling, media and meditation, globals and locals, war and terrorism, and then last but not least, conclusion. There are four main positions that can be distinguished to classify the vast and diverse academic literature on globalization. Namely, number 1, objectivism, number 2, rhetoricism, and then ideologism, and then the last one, social constructivism. In this case, from this classification of positions, we can actually identify 5 general claims about discourse as a facet of globalization. Namely, the first one, discourse can represent globalization, giving people information about it and contributing to their understanding of it. And then number 2, discourse can mispresent and mystify globalization, giving a confusion and misleading impression of it. And then number 3, discourse can be used rhetorically to project a particular view of globalization, which can also justify or legitimize the actions, policies, or strategies of particular, usually powerful, social agencies and agents. And then the next one, discourse can contribute to the constitution, dissemination, and reproduction of ideologies, which can also be seen as forms of mystification, but have a crucial systematic function in sustaining a particular form of globalization and the unequal and unjust power relations which are built into it. And then the last one, last but not least, number 5, discourse can generate imaginary representations of how the world will be or should be within strategies for change which, if they achieve hegemony, can be operationalized to transform these imaginaries into realities. For example, particular actual forms of globalization. Alright, now let's move to the next part, discourses of globalizations. Let's just jump right in. Sekar, 2005, identifies 6 core claims of globalism, as well as providing arguments against all of them. Number 1, globalization is about the liberalization and global integration of markets. And then number 2, globalization is inevitable and irreversible. Number 3, nobody is in charge of globalization. Then the next point, globalization benefits everyone, obviously. Number 5, globalization furthers the spread of democracy in the world. And then number 6, globalization requires a war on terror. In this case, the plausibility and resonance of this assumption rest upon what have been pretty successfully established as facts, obviously. Epistemologically, discourses are abstract entities which established on the basis of repetition and recurrence over time and in diverse social sites. But ontologically, they appear in the concrete form of particular texts. One contribution that CDA or critical discourse analysis can make to culturally political economic analysis is methods for analyzing texts which eliminate their contribution to strategies, discourses, and their operationalization and implementation, as well as their recontextualization in different places. The next slide, rescaling. In this case, the globalization of a country like Romania can be viewed as a matter of its rescaling, its incorporation into new relations of scale. The strategy of globalism constitutes, from this perspective, to constitute a global scale of action, interaction, and also exchange. In this case, there are also simultaneously strategies and discourses to constitute macro-regional scales, such as the European scales. So these strategies and discourses, as well as many others, are recontextualized according to Kinaryosih and Fairclough, 1999, in special entities at various scales, including nation states like Romania. The actual impact on particular nation states of recontextualized strategies and discourses is likely to be variable and predictable and potentially quite different from what strategists may have envisaged. The operationalization of this discourse of quality assurance entails its enactment. The operationalization of this discourse of quality assurance entails its enactment through the constitution and institutionalization of the new procedures, such as mechanisms, which amount to a new set of interconnected genres, such as on genre chains or networks, see, as stated by Fairclough, 2003, such as genres for staff self-evaluation and also student evaluation of courses. For further explanations, it will be delivered by my partner, Sekar. Thank you.
My name is Agustine Sekar Kinaryosih. My student number is 288, and in this video I will talk about my material on discourse analysis class. First is about media and mediation. Cultural political economy asserts that political economies are subject to cultural conditions and are culturally embedded. In contemporary societies, mass media are the predominant social field in the creation of this cultural condition. In the constitution of the public knowledge and information, belief, values, and attitude which are necessary for establishing and sustaining economic, social, and political system and orders. Change in the international political economy of communication have been an important factor for the relative success of globalist strategy and discourse. This is not to say that the media as a whole are a mere echo chamber of globalism. With respect to news, one can see the partial emergence of a global news agenda whose coverage depends upon a common research of new agency reports and film addressed to an increasingly global audience, and producing globalized representation and meaning around particular event. Such demonstrations have come to be increasingly seen and treated as primary problems of law and order, and predominant media representation in countries across the world represent them with a focus upon anticipate or actual violence rather than one the major political issues which are at stake, according to what we can call an established narrative scheme or template which is applied to new events as they occur. And then second is about global and locals. Positively, it vastly increased their access to potential resources, but insofar as agendas, perspective and values are controlled and limited in the ways I have suggested, it exposed them to the strategies and meaning favored by the powerful. Yet the relationship between media and media experience is a complex one, And the comment I made in the section 1 rescaling about the complexities, uncertainties, and unpredictability of recontextualization apply also here. There can be tension between them which affect media reception, so that the interpretation of media message, image, and representation may be highly diverse. A trap which some academic analysis of globalization falls into is treating globalization only in terms of the action and strategies of agents and players who are dominant on global, macro-regional, or national scales, and assuming the local impact of global process and tendencies. Rather than recognizing a need for locality-based analysis to establish this. One issue is the strategies of survival which people develop to deal with the effect of globalization, such as unemployment. Those in favor of the incinerator sought to ally themselves with the global incinerator industry and to justify the project in terms of EU policy and the disposal of hazardous waste, as well as appealing to anti-Romani sentiment by representing the incinerator as way to keep the gypsies out at the area. Those opposed to the incinerator saw allies in the Western Green Movement, representing the incinerator as part of an EU policy to shift the disposal of Western hazardous waste to the east. And then the third about war and terrorism. Rice interpret the New York attacks as an existential threat to U.S. security, not from other powerful states but from terrorists and weak or failed states, a new threat which demands a new strategy. Such a development is more remote than in the past, however, because the world great center of power are united by common interests, common dangers, and common values, and share a broad commitment to democracy, the rule of law, a market-based economy, and open trade. Will only be available to countries that work to govern justly, invest in the health and education of their people, and encourage economic liberty. Value must be a vital part of our relationship with other countries. In reducing this to terrorism and tyrants and adopting an aggressive military strategy, the U.S. government is arguably failing to address basic issues of justice which underlie the proliferation of irregular warfare and its own responsibility of injustice. It seeks a balance of power which favors freedom, a value which few would dissociate themselves from, but the neoconservative use the word systematically blurs the distinction between free market and political freedom, and treat them as one and the same thing. The desire for freedom is assumed to be universal, shared by Muslims as well as others. This neoconservative version of globalist strategy and discourse, which includes the discourse of the war on terror, has been effectively disseminated internationally with the assistance of the global communication industry. In terms of the five positions I distinguished earlier on discourse as a phase of globalization, what I have said above suggests that the discourse of the war on terror is primarily ideological, effectively legitimizing a strategy to preserve and extend U.S. global hegemony for large sections of the global public, including, for instance, the public of post-communist countries such as Romania, language and globalization strength even in the USA itself and Britain. And then the last is about conclusion. I shall assume that it is difficult to solve but not unsolvable. The different representation can indeed be evaluated in terms of their relative practical adequacy. by reference to social scientific evidence of various sorts on the extent to which what the suggests or imply about social reality actually happens in social reality. I use social constructivism here for the widespread recognition within social science of the socially constructed character of the social world, and not for the particular philosophy of science which gets under that name, which in its strong form claims that object or referent of knowledge are nothing more than social construction. Like say, I would reject this position while recognizing the socially constructed character of the social world. I think that's enough.
That is all from us. So we just finished talking about language and globalization, and we do appreciate that for all viewers still watching till this part of this video. Thank you very much for your attention, and we also would like to say sorry if there are any mistakes during this presentation. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.